Welcome everyone to the May Microsoft 365 adoption user groups. We've been running these for now over 7 years. I've been running them for over 7 years. I know, right, Cory? It's been a while now. I've been plugging away at this. And as I say at the beginning, everyone, I question myself, why, with the amount of work. But it's keeping up to date. It always helps. If I'm doing it, helps me to help you, which helps me. So I do love that component. But I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting from today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples with us today. And from any culture that you happen to be coming in from, the local Indigenous peoples. I ask that we be welcoming and open to all questions and viewpoints. We're kind and understanding. We use appropriate GIFs and images when we're in chat. But look, bring it on. I'm always up for a bit of a joke. Hey, Lynn, welcome. Good to see everyone. So my name is Kirsty. If you haven't actually met me before, we do have a few new faces and people in the chat that I can actually see. So I run an adoption consultancy here in Australia. So what have I been up to? I always start with a bit of a what have I been up to. I did the Rod Stewart and Cyndi Lauper concert. It was pretty cool. So I had a bit of fun. I've done an awful lot of 80s bands lately, which is usually not in my top list, but we'll bring it out. But it was so much fun. I actually really enjoyed it. And then it was coming into Easter, so my grandson was helping me make a pavlova. It was a very big bunny, and I tried to move it, and really it became a little bit more like nailed it. For my pavlova, but it was really nice, so I'll give it that. I've been flying around. I mean, last 2 months I've been talking about it. I finally finished all of my travels around Australia, so nice to actually be back home for a little bit in my own bed after flying week on week off for months. So I'm looking forward to a bit of downtime. I spent quite a bit of time with my grandson for Easter. He decided, and he has been harassing us since Christmas, to have his hair green. So he became Hulk green over Easter. We had a bit of fun with him being Hulk green. We also, then once I'd finished all my travels around, of course, I got in the car. And I actually then went up to Brisbane and I did the Brisbane Zoo, had lots of fun up there. But the main reason that I went, you may have seen in the past, is I do the International Cake Show each year. So I went to the International Cake Show, and these are the cakes that I made when I was at the International Cake Show. I did a whole Under the Sea theme and Carla the Pug, and had a bit of fun. Yes, it's all edible. And enjoying a bit of fun with my cake decorating. So that's been me. The other thing that I've actually done over the last 2 weeks or so is we had our Microsoft MVP Summit, which is always very cool, of course. Fascinating stuff, exciting stuff. Love what's coming. Lots and lots of cool stuff. Can't talk about any of it. We are totally under NDA because they will put anywhere up to a year or two before you see it. They will put it across our opinions, and we pull it apart, and they just do some mock-up designs, and we really hash it out. In fact, there's some stuff that's in the presentation today that we saw last year in 2022, and it's finally coming to fruition. So sometimes these things take a bit of time. This was the wall over in Seattle. Unfortunately, this year I didn't go to Seattle because it was literally, I had I would have been going straight from Adelaide back a day and had to be literally straight out of Adelaide over to Seattle to do it back to back. And I just went too much. My New Year's resolution was about healthy decisions. And a healthy decision was not to go off the back of having week on, week off travel for 3 months and then flipping my time zone and trying to have my holiday. Was not going to be working in Seattle. So next year, I'll definitely go next year. But that was me on the wall. So we have all their names up on the wall. There's around about 3,400 MVPs globally, of which I am one. And we've just put in all our submissions to be awarded. So cross fingers, I should be up for my 6th award. So we'll see. All right. So I am now going to hand over to our guest speaker. Our guest speaker is Cory from Microsoft, known Cory for quite a long time now, Cory. He is coming in. He's going to talk to us about the hidden change, that sort of more the IT side of things when it comes to operations. Really important that as change practitioners that we consider not just that sort of end user that sits within the business side of things, the corporate kind of side, but we've got a whole team that are often having to enact the change for us from the technical side of things. So wanted to then hand this over now to Cory so that he can actually present a little bit around these topics. And hopefully I've got it right in what I was saying and a bit of an explanation there, Cory. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
We're just going to make stuff up anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah. We'll take the conversation wherever it needs to go. So you want me to share from my side, Kirsty?
Yeah. Yes.
Cool.
I do have it here if you want.
No, that's fine.
Any cupcakes? I ate a lot of cupcakes, Herbert. Maybe too many cupcakes, but
too many cupcakes.
You can never ever have too many.
It sounds similar to when I tell people that I don't drink coffee, and they sort of sit there and go, "You what?" And you go, "No, I don't drink coffee." And then I said, "Imagine what would happen if I did drink coffee." And yes, that's when people go, I can understand why you don't drink coffee.
Yeah. I have tea. I'm a tea fiend. I drink tea all day, every day. So I just swap it out. Other caffeine.
Cool. Okay, team. Well, apart from being a non-coffee drinker, my name's Cory Banks. There are some people on the call that I recognise, so hello to those I haven't seen in a while, and obviously making a whole bunch of new friends today too. So hello to the people that I haven't met yet. I get the fantastic title of being a behavioural architect. How good is that? Basically, introducing myself to people, I say I get to mess with people's heads, which is a lot of fun. I belong to our adoption, change and service management practice within Microsoft in a division called Industry Solutions Delivery. It may not be widely known that Microsoft actually has its own consulting firm that we service our larger and more complex customers with. You won't see it advertised on the back of buses or in airline magazines. It's quite an exclusive service that we offer. It is a paid-for service, so I am a consultant and an architect within that practice and get to work with some of our biggest customers on their most challenging exploits that they get up to. At the moment, I was just talking to Kirsty before, working with a large telecommunications provider here in country, working with a large mining organisation, working with a variety of federal government senior executives through a coaching program that we're running at the moment. I can mention this, I'm working with Singapore Health and introducing all of their doctors and nurses to the Microsoft 365 platform. So quite diverse. We work across all enabling technologies from Microsoft. So from an Azure, from a Dynamics, from an M365, from security, from devices, you name it. We get stuck into it. Happy to connect on LinkedIn with anyone who wants to feel the need. And as my little phrase I put down the bottom here, so a leader of change, a knowledge strategist. I come from a KM background, which Lynn will back me up on that one. A catalyst for collaboration. You would not believe the number of projects I get involved with and say, hey, why aren't we using Teams to collaborate on this project? And they all go, what's that? So yes, a facilitator, an advocate of innovation, and little people may not necessarily know, I'm a .com veteran. So I was involved in some .com startups way back at the turn of the century. We can use that kind of term and it just takes us way back for anyone else who was involved around then. In one of my previous jobs in working in a government sector, I received an email one day. And in that email was an org chart. And this was their idea of how to manage change in this particular organization. So they were restructuring IT, everyone was being repointed into different areas, and the only piece of communication and the only bit of change management that took place was an email with an org chart in it. I think this is just an example, and it's a bit of an extreme example, but what we find is we tend to be doing it with the workforce in helping the workforce transition from the old way of doing things to the new way of doing things. But then when it comes to IT's own backyard, they tend to not necessarily practice what they preach in that kind of space. And I hope most people would probably agree with me. There will be exceptions. There will be people that do this really well. But in my experience, I have found that IT don't necessarily take the time to take their people on the journey and support them through the changes that take place. Working with a federal government agency a few years ago now, when they were transitioning from Exchange on premises to Exchange online. And we said, okay, how are you supporting your Exchange admins on this journey? And they said, oh, we're just going to send them on some training. I was like, okay, what else are you doing to support them on their journey? I was like, no, we're just going to send them on some Exchange online training. 3 months later, both of those people resigned and went to work for an organization that still had Exchange on-prem. So again, how do we help our people behind the scenes who are also going through a change and a transformation? So most of the work that we do, yes, it's focused on the end users who get to use all that wonderful technology that we have. For anyone who's involved with M365 at the moment, Copilot now on the horizon and coming to you shortly. Getting to use it now internally in Microsoft, and got to say, I'm pretty impressed with the little prompt that pops up in Outlook saying, hey, would you like us to draft a response to this email for you? And it's like, sure, give it a go. See what you come up with, and we'll see if it works for me. But interesting in how it will be able to enable what we can do and how we can do it. But also what's really interesting is Copilot for security that's also being launched at the moment. So this is where our security people in IT can actually leverage off the capabilities within the Copilot to go, what about this? What about that? What can you tell me about that? And again, rather than going finding the manual or the doc library or whatever it happens to be, they can actually be delivering that information within the context of the question that they're asking. So some pretty amazing stuff. So the key thing is that most of the time, the projects we tend to get involved with from an adoption perspective are about workplace adoption. So the workforce, how are they going to transition again from the old way to the new way that's enabled by the new technology that's taking place? But we find not much attention gets paid to the other impacted audiences that are out there, primarily our technical people. Yes, we'll see sometimes maybe we're providing some information to the help desk so they can have the appropriate knowledge base articles and the appropriate scripts where they can support people in that. But again, people, particularly the transition from on-premise infrastructure to cloud-based services, it's a pretty major shift. If you're not taking people on that journey, then you're at risk, particularly where what I've seen as an example is they're not taken on the journey. They keep working the old way. They applied the old way of doing things to the cloud environment, and they end up breaking things. It doesn't work the same way it used to. You're not having to patch things. You're not having to do all that kind of stuff anymore. And what's really interesting is working with a customer recently where they piped up and said, so hold on. My admins for M365, there is so much information coming through the admin console that, that they can't keep up with it. Can we actually condense that down or not have as much? And it's like, well, really, your admin should have transitioned from doing more of the maintenance side of things to being more proactive, to be looking at, okay, how is the changes that are coming from a cloud-based service that we don't have a choice that will land in our tenant? How are we assessing both the technical risk around that and the technical impact and the business risk and the business impact that will have? Again, they should be transitioning from someone who is at the back end of the house trying to make sure that things don't change. And it's quite interesting from an on-premise perspective. You talk to some of the Exchange admins and those kinds of people working in that environment. The whole thing was, if you change it, it has a risk of breaking. So we do minimum changes. And when we do changes, we're prepared to roll back. We're prepared to do all those kinds of things to help them deal with the fact that now you are going to get changes, whether you like them or not, and it's going to happen. And we can't tell you when it's going to happen in your tenant or anything like that. That just blows their minds. Okay, they find it very difficult to help to deal with that and to transition across to that way of thinking. So we move through into that space and then say, well, again, it's not just about the same kind of person, because we have the similar challenges to what we have with our workforce behind the scenes as well. So yeah, they're not all sitting at a desk. They're not all on headphones waiting to take your call. They're actually diverse in where they are and what they're doing. They're diverse in the processes that they undertake and the knowledge that they require to be able to operate and perform successfully in the new way of things. So again, how are we also preparing them? Because again, one size does not fit all. I used to use a terminology where I said no one likes vanilla. And I remember saying that at a SharePoint conference many years ago, and I had someone tweet me afterwards saying, research shows that 63.2% of Americans prefer vanilla as their favorite flavor. And it was like, okay, I obviously need to choose my words wisely when I talk about things like this. Nobody's average. Okay, and there's a fantastic book out there which I'll recommend. I'll track it down and share the link, where it talks about a number of different scenarios where we have this penchant to say, oh well, let's just find the average, and particularly from delivering a service and delivering training and those kinds of things, it can be, oh well, everyone receives the same thing because that's more cost effective. Yet we all know that that's not going to have the greatest impact that we could have. We need to have 2 or 3 different scenarios that we're talking about, or 2 or 3 different personas that we're dealing with in how we design what we're doing. Telling a highly mobile salesperson that, hey, you need to come into headquarters and sit in a computer lab in front of a desktop PC in a sandbox environment and learn how to use this tool, when their day-to-day operations are all done on their phone, the likelihood of them attending, for starters, is quite small. And if they do rock up, they're going to have a bad experience. So again, how are we tailoring our programs and what we do from a communication and engagement perspective, from a resistance management perspective, and from an education and a motivation perspective? This is a different audience. It's a different impacted group, and we should be identifying who has influence over them. How can we then take them on the journey and get them to do what we need them to do? And then hopefully end up being more productive than what they were in the past. So one caveat here, though, is when we sit down and talk to IT people about new platforms and new technologies and the use of them for their team, they tend to default to a mindset of, oh yeah, well, we're enabling this for this team to go and do this and this team to go and do that. And it can actually take you quite a while to break them down and say, no, 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 no. How is your team going to use this to do your own work, to organize your own information, to connect and collaborate with each other, to be able to share, to ask questions, to do all those kinds of things? And it can take quite a while to break them from the habit of thinking about their customers, because they're extremely customer focused. It's what they do every day of the week. But to actually allow them to be just a little bit selfish and think about how can they actually get the most out of the platform? What scenarios might be specific to your operations area who are managing these platforms? And again, it could be it plugs into ADO, it plugs into Jira, it plugs into, as guys know, Teams plugs into everything. So again, how can we bring that information into a single point where this team can collaborate and communicate together and bring it into Teams? So a number of different things that play out when we start looking behind the scenes, and again, behind the curtain to a certain extent, and identifying who are these people, how are they going to be impacted both technically, but also what are the opportunities that are now presented to them as well, to be able to leverage the capability, not just operate it for others, but to use it themselves. So the 3 major challenges I've come across and what I wanted to share with you guys today was, the first one is mindset. And this is particularly where people in IT operations, for some of them, have been doing the same thing for a very, very, very long time. Running backups, writing scripts, running PowerShell, doing this, doing that, managing devices, managing patches, backups, restorations, the whole box and dice, and they've all been doing it, and they have been in charge of their own kingdom to do this. So they have set up all the shortcuts, All the pathways are all there and they're very well traveled, and they have grown very comfortable about where they are and what they're doing and the way that they approach things and the way that they think about these things. There are some who quickly transition because they've been keeping up to date and looking at, oh, hold on, there's some cool stuff going on over here with, it could be anything from, um, Azure virtual desktops. It could be, the desktops in the cloud. You've got W365 now out there with M365. So you've got your own cloud PC. It could be that they're looking at cloud printing. It could be a variety of different things that they have been keeping up to date with. But for others, and most of them, is, hold on, I deal with a lot of legacy. I deal with legacy infrastructure. I deal with legacy devices. I deal with legacy networks. And I actually need to know more about old stuff than new stuff. So how, again, do we get them to look forward to a positive approach to what's coming and what's changing, what's here now, and what's actually possible? One of the key things we come up against from a resistance perspective is people considering obsolescence. So they sit there and go, well, I don't want to go to the new place because that means I no longer have a job. Now, that's a very challenging environment to then operate within. And again, we need to create positivity around the transition and let people see the opportunity that's provided by it. I've referred to Exchange admins a bit because it's a very big shift that they went through, from them literally grooming boxes to say, you must stand up, please stay up, you are the lifeblood of this organization. I'm going to come in every morning and I'm going to pat you and do all this kind of stuff because they needed to be there, to now you have absolutely pretty much all zero control over the infrastructure that you put in place around messaging in your organization. You have the ability to configure it, my word, yes, but you don't need to patch it anymore. We've got service level agreements in place. It's now provided as a service, as opposed to you being the service provider yourself. And that is a mindset shift. And again, some people will make that transition quickly. Some it will take time. Some will not change at all. And what's really interesting is being able to identify those people, because again, it's then a question of, well, can we find you other opportunities? Are there other things that you would like to do? Not always the case. The second then is practices. So again, we're not just changing the way they think, but we're changing the work they do and how they do it. Again, monitoring things, configuring things, alerting you to certain things that are taking place. Hopefully, again, they can see the level of automation that's now available within their environment, and be able to make their practices a lot less labor intensive and a lot more easier for them to do. The last one, though, is governance. And I tend to call this the legacy ceiling that we hit. So yes, it's great and fantastic that our teams, for example, now want to be product teams instead of projects. And they now want to continuously deliver improved services to their clients internally, and to what they're doing and how they're doing. However, we then find that they might be able to put together a multifaceted and multi-skilled team to be able to do this to a certain extent. However, unless other areas within IT and even within the business are also transitioning to a product approach as opposed to a project approach, then you run into these walls. So as an example, within this sprint, we need to ensure that we have the security review done on this service that's available. So I'll go to security, and security send me a document. It's a 60-page document, and I'm asked to fill it in. And I fill it in, and then I submit it, and they say, thank you very much. We'll get back to you in 3 weeks. If you're successful in the initial assessment, then that decision will go to the review board. That review board meets once a quarter, and then that will then go to the ICT governance board, which meets once every 2 months. And so we'll be able to get back to you in about 4 months' time. Now, the team then sort of sits there and go, I have to get this done in this sprint of 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks. So we've run into these challenges of legacy models and legacy thinking coming up against being able to operate at the speed of cloud. So again, going on that journey, it's not just around that team being empowered to do what they need to do. They have dependency on a variety of other areas of the organization with which they need to be able to connect with, and those people need to be responsive. Nothing worse than being told, yes, please take a ticket and wait in line. And hold on, well, I can't move forward. I can't progress until I have that dependency on the work that you're doing. So we need to, again, look at those governance models and look at more of an outside-in approach as opposed to inside-out. Questions, qualms, queries? No, everyone agrees with me. Awesome.
Great stuff so far, Cory. No questions here.
So far. Thank you, Brandon. Lynn.
It's very familiar, though.
I did have my hand up, but I meant to just say I agree. That's I like governance. Governance is good. That's the most important part for me.
Enough governance is good. Yes. Yes. Okay. So key considerations, and this is more talking to you guys about hopefully things that you should already be doing or things to consider moving forward. So number one, including areas within IT as impacted groups and identifying existing influences. Are people still doing impact analysis and, understanding which parts of the organization? Just raise a quick raise of hands, understanding which parts of the organization are impacted positively and negatively by the change you're trying to implement?
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Depends on the organization.
Well,
and where we're at. Always comes down to where we're at.
So I've run plenty of impact assessments. When I'm on customer land now, but when I was in professional services running impact assessments, you do all this great work with the business and then hand it over to the people that can make decisions. And there's no decisions to be made off of that good data. So now I'm on customer land. I'm hoping to flip that around and actually use those insights to help drive the changes.
There's an important lesson I learned a while ago, and it was there's sort of three groups that you need to connect with when there is a change about to happen or a change is happening. So one is those that are directly impacted. And again, they're the ones that you engage with and take them on the journey. The second group are the ones that are what I call indirectly impacted. So these are people who have a dependency on the people who are directly impacted. They're not necessarily impacted themselves by the change, but they're indirectly impacted because a team that they are working with is suddenly going to go through this massive change, and their capacity may be reduced for a certain period of time, or they're going to change the way they operate, and then they'll come back to me and change the way I need to engage with them as well. But the third group that often, more often than not, gets left out are the people who are not impacted at all. Again, the number of times the customer comes back to me from a professional services perspective and says, why do we need to tell people who aren't being impacted that they're not being impacted? I said, because if you don't tell them, they will assume the worst. They will start thinking, hold on, no one's told us about this. Does that mean that we're going to get sprung or something's going to happen? It'll go straight to black hat. It'll go straight to myths. It'll go straight to rumor and innuendo and a whole bunch of other stuff. So a nice motto I use is, vacuums get filled. If you leave a vacuum, then something else is going to fill it. So you might as well fill it yourself. And even if the message is, particularly the one I look at is, setting up a rhythm of communication, and then you go, actually, nothing's changed this week, so we're not going to send anything out. Again, suddenly people start going, hey, no newsletter came out. Does that mean the project's been cancelled? What's going on? I don't understand what's going on. So you need to fill that gap. And even if the message is nothing has changed, then that is the message that needs to be sent. But particularly in saying to people, just want to make you aware of this program that's taking part in this place in the organization. Clearly articulate to them that this does not involve you directly or indirectly, but just to let you know that other parts of the business are going through this at the moment. helps allay those fears and make sure that no one assumes that, well, they haven't told us yet because they're going to make it a surprise, or, you know, they're going to tell us at the end of financial year, we're next, etc., etc., etc. So where you can, please also think about the people who aren't being impacted and clarifying for them that they're not, because otherwise assumptions rule the roost in that kind of context. So include IT as being impacted, and ensure that the leaders within the impacted areas of the organization are aware that their teams are going to be impacted by this, and are going to need some support to be able to do it, not just emailing out a new org chart. More to be done in that space. Second one, the challenges here are where we get those delays. And again, particularly from a service management perspective and from a change management perspective, you know, we're focused on how do we accelerate the journey to get to a point where we're getting the benefits of the solution, of the platform, of the new way of working, of the insert change here. So how can we do that to help them accelerate on that? And that what we do in that space is that it will depend on what works for your organization and for the audience you're talking to. For some people, it's about the bonus. What's the value that's being created? Others, however, and particularly in the IT space, talk more about the risks you can mitigate. So one is around the positives and the things that we'll be able to do because of this. The other is around how we will stop the negatives from happening. Slightly different message in communicating it, but some people will react better to risk avoidance than they will for benefit realization. You know, some people will sit there and go, yeah, it's great to have those goals and ambitions that you want to be able to do that, but it's still not going to work. Whereas if you can come in and say, here's what we're doing this because it reduces the risk of data loss, reduces the risk of this, reduces the risk of that, then they will tend to get on board with that rather than, you know, some lofty ambitions and goals of making sure everyone's a happy camper in the entire organization. So also identifying the delays that also come from that governance perspective. So sit there and go, hey, CISO, just to let you know, we're trying to roll this out. And as you're aware, this has been endorsed by insert name of CEO or insert name of minister here. And we're looking to do this by the end of June. Just want to let you know that we've currently been advised that for security to do their piece that we require, it's going to take 9 months. One of the things that we've done with a couple of organizations, and this tends to work out pretty well, is we say, let's clearly articulate what your current governance model is. And again, they have problems in doing that because the governance model wasn't created for cloud-based services and capabilities. It's all, you know, oh, we need to go through the procurement cycle. We need to go and buy hardware. We need to go and buy the software. We need to build the machines. We need to test the machines. And it's like, no. And you've got access and it's all there and you can expand if you need to. But again, we're running into those kinds of challenges in what we do and how we do it. So again, how can we reduce those delays that are formed because of our legacy practices within the organization? And what we've done with those guys is we look at a hybrid model and we say, okay, let's park your standard governance model. We're not going to go around it. We're still going to comply with it, but we're going to put in place a highway over here that's going to allow us to perform at speed. And yes, it may take dedicated resources out of those teams that need to be sitting on this fast track, for want of a better word, team over here. And then, yes, they're going to need to backfill for capacity to be able to do their existing backlog of work that they need to get through. But what we've found over time is by setting up that hybrid governance model to allow them still to achieve all of the checks and balances and everything that needs to be done, but to do it at speed. When we come to the end of the exercise where we've been going through that transition, we then go, okay, is there any reason why the new model can't come back and replace the old model? and why you can't continue to now operate at the speed of the cloud rather than going back to your monolithic legacy governance process. So it actually helps to sort of prove it out. Because again, you'll get the naysayers who go, no, it still takes 6 months for us to do this and 3 months for us to do that. Now, people in IT have scenarios too, but they just may not recognize them as that. So again, new ways of working, new ways of being able to respond to a query from a customer, new ways of reducing the amount of time it takes to get back to them with a resolution, new ways of engaging with the appropriate stakeholders inside of IT and navigating the labyrinth to try and make sure we've got everyone on board. Working with a customer at the moment, we've mapped out to get to production for application migration into the cloud within Azure, to get to production where it's actually in there and it's running, up and running. The process includes 20 different people from 20 different areas of the business that sit within, I think it's like a dozen different business units that all have their own process and all have their own way of tracking what they do and how they do it, from Excel spreadsheets to Jira to ADO to you name it. There's all sorts of tools. There is no consistent end-to-end workflow or practice. Basically, each area has gained its own critical mass and has been able to dictate inside out the process that it will then place on other people to suit them in what they do and how they operate. So again, getting them engaged with, okay, there's better ways of doing this. And it's not anything you deliver as an external party from our side is Teflon coated. It's just going to slip off. You can't go in with Microsoft best practice because everyone just goes, well, that's not going to work here because we're not Microsoft. But co-designing it with them. So getting them to show them what's possible, what the tools can do, what the new way of working would look like, getting them to come up with it totally mitigates a whole bunch of resistance that you're going to get later on with what you're doing. So similar as you would run scenario discovery workshops. So I mentioned before, I was in Singapore a couple of weeks ago. We had 100 champions from across one of the clusters over there. In the room, we identified 17 unique scenarios across the board. There were lots of duplicates. But engaging them, we showed them what was possible. We said, where do you think this can make a difference in the work that you do today? What potential new ways of working does it unlock for you? They are now motivated as champions to go, yep, I've had a say in this. That's my process that I've designed with consultation with my area, and I am now going to go and champion that and take that back to my business and introduce it to them. So similar inside of IT as well. Drive that accelerated capability development. So again, how can we not only identify what the new way of working is, but how can we accelerate your achievement of it and the benefits that you're going to realize from doing it? Does that make sense for people? Does anyone vehemently disagree?
No, I totally agree. Totally agree. But when in that session, or I should say, an outcome of that session with those champs, how did you feed it back to them? We heard you. I mean, what was the form or the format that you fed that back to them?
Yep. So I don't think I'll show it to you. There was a newsletter update that they did as part of their program where they put some photos of me up on stage and me interviewing people with a microphone and stuff like that. So we thanked them for their efforts and congratulated them for their participation in what they do. They had little stickers and pop caps or something that goes on the back of a phone. I don't know what they are. But in Singapore, that's, the gimmicks and the little gifts is big. So in doing that, so they were rewarded, they were recognized, they were thanked for starters. And then when we, all the way through, we're then transparent away, okay, a group came up around, for example, project toolkit. So when we run a project, despite the fact we're getting them to adopt a product mindset, when we run projects, we can set it up, we can do the task management and planner, we can do the teams to do this, we can do our risk register in a list, we can do all this kind of stuff. Again, plugging the different capabilities together for a project toolkit, and recognize the people who contributed to that when we're talking about that project toolkit. We're then building the campaign assets around that scenario, and then we are going to run coaching clinics with those champions around each of the top 5 scenarios that we're selecting with them. So we come back to them again and say, hey, thank you very much for your ideas. We've been away and we've built out, here is a webinar with a script that you can run to demonstrate the capability. Here's a user guide that you can share with your people. Here is a list of all the training that's available in the Learning Pathways site that's related to this specific course or this specific scenario. And I think the thing that we then followed up with was saying, and we'll be back in 3 months to run another workshop with you because there's new capabilities that are going to be gradually launched over time within the platform. So continuing to engage and motivate them and reward and recognize them for the efforts they're doing, because most of those champions are doing this as beyond their day job. It's not their day job to go and do all this kind of stuff. They have the passion that we want to harness, but we want to motivate them and recognize them, because there's nothing that will lose you a champion quicker than just taking from them. You've got to give something back. And again, whether that's, hey, we'll send you on some training, we'll give you a certification, we'll give you a ruler, whatever it happens to be, you've got to find ways of recognizing and rewarding them for their efforts.
Yep. Good stuff. Thanks.
Sorry. Other questions or other views on some of these considerations or things that I've talked about today? Don't make me start calling out people's names, because I will.
Pull out some names. This. Yes.
Okay. Hi. I was quite curious because when it comes to adoption, I think also one of the tricky ones are the senior executives, and in terms of addressing them. And I know that you were talking about coaching of senior executives, and I'm wondering, how do you go about trying to address that? Them as the key impacted stakeholder, because they can make or break, obviously, whether the adoption is going to happen.
Yep. So I'll give you a couple of examples, both with internal IT executives and then also with business executives as well. I hate to tell you this, but they are not going to rock up for your webinar. And they're not going to attend your Genius Bar. They're not going to, they don't tend, and through no intention, but they don't attend to socialize, if you know what I mean, with other people during these kinds of activities. So it does need to be, I used to use the term white glove treatment until I did work with customs. And then we talk about the silver service that we provide these people. They have a very different definition of white glove treatment in that organization. So what we are doing at the moment with Singapore Health as an example is we are doing coaching clinics with the executive and their support team. So some of them will have an executive assistant, some of them will have an executive officer, that runs their office and what they do and how they do it. So one to many in terms of with that group, we'll run a dedicated coaching session where we ask them, what are the key activities that they undertake at the moment? We'll ask them what are their biggest challenges to connecting, communicating, sharing, searching, finding information, and then we show them what's possible. And then we follow up with the executive assistant or executive officer and say, right, how can we get your team to adopt this? Because they are the people that are going to drive this. What you'll find is most executives do what they're told because someone else is managing their inbox and someone else is managing their calendar. So for them, they are just, look, steer me in the right direction, point me where I need to go, and I'll go and do stuff. So they don't necessarily choose the tools or the platform, or even in some instances, the devices that they use. you'll find people influencing those decisions for a number of people that aren't necessarily tech savvy. You'll get the tech savvy ones who'll go out there and go, no, I want the latest ABG TQF model 750. And that's when IT then comes back and says, sorry, we don't support that. And then the CEO goes, you do now. So yeah, it's more intimate. And it's more coaching and specific to their needs as opposed to something generic and done en masse.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you. Because I see that as an area that I should tackle, and most people just ignore it. But I think they need to be addressed because I think they are a stumbling block.
Yep. So Glynis, the first piece of advice, or the other piece of advice I'm going to give you is start with the exec assistants. So I did a piece of work with a large, what would they be called now, a generation and retailer in the electricity industry in Australia. And we started with the exec assistant, and we got the exec assistant to the CEO. And 3 weeks later, I was running a coaching session with the CEO, the CFO, the chief marketing officer, and the CIO on a Friday afternoon for a couple of hours, just running through how they could use Office 365 to help them do what they do. All created from the exec assistant who said, I am putting this in your diaries and you will attend.
It's interesting one that, Cory, because I, have been on a program not long ago, and the change team inside said, no, there is no special treatment with the execs and the senior leaders. They come through the program like everyone else. We're trying to shift the culture. They've been informed of this is how we're working. Their pro side changed. They've been taught the whole lot. And of course, when it came time to go live, all of them went, we will not turn up. And of course, when you've already got everything all mapped out, you're desperately then trying to set up a silver service in amongst everything else, of which the EAs weren't on board and just went, you've got 30 minutes with them, and everyone else was getting a 2-hour session. And then no one was wanting to do it. And then we also had one of the execs who received their new solution and just bagged out because didn't go through the training, didn't go through anything, had no idea what to do, and then was so distressed and angry and couldn't get it. And it just started to then verbally, and I went, guys, I warned you. And it's just, but you can only lead them so far before they might go on a tangent themselves. But that silver service is so important.
Yeah, but that being said, some of them will want to, go and mix with everyone and say, yep, I'll rock up. And again, even having them introduce it, having senior leaders come in and say that, but then having them hang around, because the other one is, what senior leaders have a habit of doing is rocking up for the kickoff or for the ribbon cutting at the end, and then not seeing hide nor hair of them in the middle. Yet they can be some of the biggest influencers. So I'm going to tell you a quick story on this. Sat down with a CEO of an organization, got the opportunity to come in and talk to them, work with their XO and exec assistant on how they can actually operate an executive office with Office, so to speak. And he said to me one day, he sort of said, what really annoys me is when people send attachments. That really gets my get. He sort of said it goes missing, and then there's multiple copies, and everyone. And I said, well, so what could you do to influence your team? And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, as an example, at your next ELT meeting, could you stand up and say that, okay, boys and girls, from this point forwards, we're going to only send links, no attachments. I will not read anything you send me that's an attachment. And he said, that's a bit ballsy. And I said, yeah, but try it, see if it'll work. And he did. He got up and said, okay, we're going to lead by example with this team. We're going to, instead of having all the commiserations that come with sending attachments, and I don't need to tell you guys all the negatives about doing that, we're going to send links. Now they got to the next LT meeting the following month, and the chief marketing officer got up and said, okay, we're just now wanting to update you guys on this new product we're bringing to market, etc. And the CEO just sort of piped up and said, I haven't seen anything come through on this. No, I sent it through. He said, oh, did you send it as a link? And the guy said, no. I said, okay, well, we'll move on to the next agenda item then. Now, from that point forward, how many times do you think people sent attachments after that? And that's no training, that's no comms, that's no nothing. That is a nudge. Okay, that is someone from a position of influence saying, I'm not going to tolerate that kind of thing anymore. And this is the way that we're going to work. And it's, being done to them to a certain extent instead of with them. But that's the kind of thing to get to where, that kind of thing. And the other one we lined him up with was, after every meeting you have, can you please go and talk to a different person on your leadership team and just say to them, hey, how's the Microsoft 365 stuff going in your neck of the woods? And again, that's not training, that's not comms, that's not any of that kind of stuff. But that was someone suddenly has the CEO of the organization, them asking a question about a program that's being delivered in their part of the organization. That might be something I need to pay more attention to and actually have a real answer for him than the one that I actually gave him, which was me making stuff up on the spot. So again, those kinds of nudges can help tell people that this is important and that this needs to be done. Yes, you've got to have the right kind of leader that's open to doing that. But it was quite interesting. We then took him through some of the behavioral insights and nudge theory and stuff like that, and he ended up applying it to a whole bunch of stuff, and on changing the habits, particularly of his senior leaders, where he could just simply ask a question and he would then know that that would prompt people to go and actually do something. Not directly saying, I task you with this, thou must go and do this, but just sitting in a meeting and saying, it'd be really interesting to understand how our frontline staff feel about these kinds of things. And hopefully that's enough of a hint for people to go, oh, we better run some workshops, or we better send some surveys, or we better collect some information from these people, rather than being explicit and saying, please go and do X by this date. So a couple of different things in there, Glynis, that hopefully you might be able to take away and leverage.
Okay, perfect. Thanks very much there, Cory.
Thanks very much for that, Cory. We'll get into what's new to adoption and 365, and hopefully you can stick around and see how much you know in regards to what's actually new. Okay, let's come back in, and we'll just present again. I appreciate your time, Cory. Okay. Okay, just get everything back out of the way. Rightio. So then, what's new? It was actually a big month in terms of adoption. I mean, we've got the M365 side of things, but then there's the adoption side of things. I did present at the adoption user group down in Adelaide in the afternoon, just after I had done my session. When I was down in Adelaide, I then presented to the technical team in regards to a change program that I'd actually run. If you wanted to watch the recording, don't forget the presentation. I've put it in the chat, so you can come back in and have a look at this particular presentation if you do want any of the updates. Plus, it's actually recorded. Latest information, you will find it all on the YouTube. If you subscribe to the channel, you'll get the video when it does go live. If for whatever reason you do have to leave, it'll probably flow over a little in today's session. See how we track. There is a whole heap more in terms of collab talk and asking and answering questions from the community. So you'll be able to go through some of those newer videos that have gone live. Okay. I'll always put in some of the release notes and what's actually going on, but if you want to know what's happening across adoption, it's a really great page for you to get up to speed. So underneath here was things like the champs call, the latest champs call. There were 2 actually for April. Some really good information in there. I will go through 1 or 2 core things, but I would recommend going and having a look, and there's also the download in there as well. Viva Goals has its own office hours resources. I have talked a little bit about sort of this space, but now you can go in and you'll be able to see those recordings as well if you really want to get yourself up to speed in terms of Viva Goals and OKR, that OKR componentry. Then I would recommend you come in and start getting and diving into some of the videos and downloads if you want to get across it. Glint now has its own sort of page when it comes to adoption and the resources that are actually in there. Go and have a look if you're not familiar with Glint. Okay. Then we have the ability to go and register for more details about Copilot in Microsoft Viva. So you can go put your name down and what are the areas that you're interested in, and they will keep you up to speed rather than you constantly having to drill in and find out if you want to receive those emails. There's also the Viva registration as well, so you can come in and get some more details about that. Okay. The new Forrester report has just come out in regards to content platforms, with Microsoft being right up there in the stronger strategy leader space. Highly recommend going in and having a bit of a read through that. They were looking at different criteria up against other solutions such as Box and Google. It's got some interesting content in there for you to go through. There is now over 80 sessions on the live and on-demand user training. So they're running, are going to be in US times, of course, but there's also the ability to do the on-demand training too. So there were so many topics. I won't dive into it, but go in and have a little bit of a look, even on things like accessibility. There's the Champions continuous learning space. So now there's recordings that are going in there with a customer story. Good one to have a look at. That one is also going to be over in the Champions calls as well. So you will see some of that flowing between the two, but they will divide out and then you'll be able to look on here. Hamad, the link to the slides is just back up a little bit in chat if you want to have a look. Viva Topics has now a pilot guide underneath adoption resources that's gone in. Under Viva Learning, there are now some email templates for you to be able to download should you be rolling out Viva Learning. Under Viva Engage, in the playbooks, there's an Analytics and Viva Engage under the playbooks. Now, a year ago at the MVP Summit, Caruana went through the ecosystem when it came to end user training. There was a couple of slides that she actually had put in front of us, and those slides really helped to understand what was going on across the learning space with Microsoft and what's available for us to be able to draw on or plug in and what's required. So I recommend going in and having a little bit of a look at some of the content and what is available when it comes to supporting your organization and the platforms. Things like the Microsoft community training, for example, and when you look at what's on what from the technical ecosystem, it's interesting to sort of understand. Like the community training is very much there's sort of that whole offline kind of content. And what do you need? What's the scenario? Who are you going to do it for? And how it all kind of plugs together. So some good slides in there. When it comes to the learning solution capabilities, you'll be able to then see, what is the type of experience when it comes to those platforms to be able to help and support you and know what it's going to draw from. Okay. The new Work Trend Index is now out. It's around the new performance equation when it comes to the age of AI. Although it's not really focused so much on AI, when you start to really read into it, AI, I suppose, is the enabler when it comes to the way that we're actually working. So there's some interesting stats in there. Go and have a look. When it comes to unblocking Viva deployment and adoption, there are now a Getting Started with Viva series that you can go and watch the 2 recordings that are going that are now live. Now, these are weekly interactive webinars that are at 7 a.m. This is over that US Pacific time, but you can register, so you can go in and register, or you can go in and watch them after the fact. So I would recommend that one. Now, you can actually self-nominate into the VCCP. So now the VCCP allows you to be able to engage with the Viva product team, and they will do, and depending on what you've got going on and agreements, for example, you can get into sort of one-on-one calls or involved into interviews and get in on those early preview and adopter programs. So these are for current Microsoft Viva customers. So you have to have that licensing. And then what you can do is you can come in and then nominate and get involved in that community and help shape Viva. The Microsoft blog, there's not a new blog or newsletter out right at the moment. However, there is a piece that's gone in there in regards to the upcoming technical skills events. So there's a newsletter in there around what are all the different events to be able to support, even like your IT team, for example, and there's a ton in there in terms of samples of upcoming community events from the technical skilling side. So one to put forward in front of your IT. I thought it might be of value considering the session we just had with Cory. Okay. Community Day, so the new place for us to go around community. So these are community events that are running all around the world. There is a few new ones that have gone on the list. So I thought I'd just keep you up to date on some of those new ones, what's actually hitting us now. But more have gone on now from sort of that November timeframe towards the end of the year. So you'll be able to see some of those a little later. There isn't a new newsletter for superheroes, but please keep up to date in terms of the superheroes and watch the recordings. I've left that in here for you for this month if you didn't see last month's newsletter. There is a AMA that's actually coming up around Microsoft Project and Planner. So it's an Ask Me Anything that's going to be run on the tech community on May 10th at 9 a.m. PT time. So that'll be the 11th for us at around about, I think it's 2 a.m. So you can RSVP and get involved in that event should you wish to. Microsoft Teams Emergency Center also have a bit of a look inside of it, so you can join them for an insider look. If it's something that you're interested in terms of the new Emergency Operations Center, you can register and go to that event. There's a blog that's gone up in terms of accelerating employee growth around Viva Learning. I know that we had Andrea Lum last month and she was going through Viva Learning with us. But if you wish to, you can go in and read the latest blog. One of the core components about that in terms of a takeout is that there's actually 2 new APIs that have come into play. So there's the Employee Learning API and the Course Activity API. This means that you'll be able to plug these into Viva Learning to be able to help and support you around some of your providers and your LMS content. The Course API, Course Activity API, is using LMS 365. So if you're using LMS 365, you'll be able to, soon plug that in. It is in public preview. It's not quite live yet. These are all in public preview, but you could have a look at that as a feature. They're also bringing out that learning journey so that you can do it from the web browser. So not just through Teams in terms of Viva Learning, you can go to the web browser now as well to be able to see Viva Learning. So that's coming out. Viva Learning has its new community hub. So if you go in there, it's like the adoption page for a lot of the other components that we've seen across Viva. So it now has its own. So liking that new content. So that's the what's new in adoption. So what's new in 365? Are we ready? I know it's always those, strap in, put your sneakers on as we get going. Right. This was in the Community Champs session. The availability in the reports center. So when you go into admin center and you go into the reports, there is that if you're a global admin or a global reader, so those report readers are there as part of default, or maybe you're the experience success manager, there is a new experience insights that's actually coming into play. So this is all part of the employee experience when you think of Viva. So that's all kind of flowing in now. So you can toggle between the new views, but it is only for organizations with over 2,000 licenses. Okay, so that does need to be taken into consideration. It then unblocks that sort of access to some of the back end reporting that's flowing through as part of that sort of Azure AD role, the new Azure AD role, which is the User Experience Success Manager. So you've got different report, I suppose, access roles. It's probably the best way to explain it, that you can actually tie in to individuals within your organization. If you don't have access to any of the reports in the administration side of things, you might want to reach out to your IT team so that you can get into things like, all those adoption scores and insights and reporting. Sorry. Okay. Now, oh, by the way, I'll get some water. Sorry. Too much talking. It's not like me. This is going to be accessible, this particular report, through the Microsoft Teams app. So you can see the experience insights in preview. It's actually sitting within Teams. Then what you can do is you can monitor those experience insight data, and you can evaluate things as well, because you can do a trial as part of the experience insight. And the experience insight, so say, for example, you've got trial licenses and there's a whole new feature and functionality around this where maybe you want to give a project to some stuff or Visio, and you can trial it. So it will actually give you experience around those trials as well flowing through. So in Teams meetings, so Snapchat Lens has come into Teams meetings, so we can have a little bit of fun in regards to our environment. And I know that there's a lot of people that are a little hesitant in regards to using some of the new video features and things like Snapchat lenses and stuff like that in a business context. But we often have more than a business context when we're in our organization. We have a lot of social things as well. Okay. Now, the tenant admin does have control over enabling or disabling these. Okay. They are on by default. They are not something that you pre-install. They also require the user to give explicit content, a consent over it to be able to use those filters. Okay. So you can turn the filters off. You can uninstall them if needs be. It's available for our general Teams for Work customers, and as well as EDU. Now it will be coming out fairly soon. We've got together emojis that are actually come into play. If you haven't actually tried it, you can do a high five. You can type in high five and then hit enter, and they can high five you back. So it's interactive. So you'll be able to do this. There are new layouts available. And as part of those new layouts, they can actually join a meeting. So once it hits a capacity, so 1,000 people is when it hits capacity, you'll have a 10,000 meeting. It's going to change it now so that you've got this new layout when it's in view only. So once you hit over 1,000, you feel the 1,001st person, you're going to have this view only experience coming into play. So we'll have then 9 videos on the stage in a 3x3 fashion, and with no content then sort of being shared. But it's got a side-by-side layout when the content is shared of up to 7 videos shown. So this is the new layout experience once you hit over 1,000 people. New spatial audio feature is coming into play in terms of Teams meetings. Okay, so this allows better quality when it comes to voice of the attendees and that sort of that visual in the gallery view. So it's only about gallery. So it's very much around the sound and trying to help you when you're in that gallery view. Now there are some limitations. So one-on-one calls, large meetings are not supported at this point. Wireless audio is not actually supported, and it is only in that gallery view. So the spatial audio, if you do have it, you'll see the new button, and that's what it's there. If you've got screenshots in your training and things like that, you might want to update and put it in and talk about it. Okay. So that's going to be coming soon. There's new improvements in terms of the meeting lobby policy with the update. What you're going to see is if you've got distribution lists, it's going to allow those users as part of the distribution list to bypass the lobby when you set the policy. So when you do your options, when you set it as to people I invite as part of those lobby policies, okay? Because otherwise they used to be sitting in, when it was a distribution list, they weren't recognized as part of the organization. So therefore they then would sit in the lobby when it was a distribution list. So it's just starting to swap that out, okay? Well, coming to Teams meetings. So the Viva Topics apps are going to be available as a first-party built-in app. You don't have to do the script for it anymore. So a user can then add in Viva Topics as a physical app, and it's going to be there and pre-installed for users to be able to just access on the left rail inside Teams. In the past, there was all sorts of scripting stuff to be able to drop it in for your organization. That's not the case anymore. Mark all as read in the activity feed. Yay. I know it's one that I, had wanted to have coming in for a while. I have been waiting for it. If you're in and using some of the earlier EAs or been working in preview or inside Microsoft environment, we've had it for a while, but it's nice to see it flowing through we're tenants. I know I tenant swap an awful lot, so it's nice to see that finally coming into play, the Mark all. Intelligent meeting recap. Now, as part of the AI features and functionality, we've got both our Teams Premium and then, of course, our Standard when it comes for the users that don't have Teams Premium. So the AI-powered meeting recap then means you get personalized recommendations to be able to revisit things like your meetings and insights, for example. Now, depending on whether you got the license or not, you're going to have more features and functionality. So like all things, Premium comes with a ton of different functionality. I know that when we had Craig come in a few months, 2 months ago, I think it was, he was talking about just hold off on if you wanted to do the preview, the take up the license where you can have it on preview for a couple of months and trial it, do the trial. And he said wait for a couple of features to come out. It's probably now getting close to where you might want to take this up. So this is coming in around mid-May, so in another couple of weeks you might want to take up that trial if you want to start looking into some of these things, because this one is I'm particularly looking forward to seeing, and he did talk about this 2 months ago. So the intelligent recap, when it comes to premium, so this is the premium side, it then gives you a recall. So you can see then as part of the meeting, when you go back to the meeting, it's actually got a recap. Let me get my pen out so I can highlight this for you. So you'll see up the top here, here's the meeting and here's the recap. So this recap functionality brings in things like, well, who was your speakers? What were the topics? When were they talking sort of throughout it? What is the content that was available for it? And then it's got all of the notes, suggested notes. So it goes through the meeting and it starts to actually then give you notes off the back of it and action items as well. So you can now start to see this coming into play. Some fabulous features that are part of Premium. It's one of the reasons why I would potentially take on Premium, apart from all of the webinar features and functionalities. Okay. So there's meeting recap enhancements as well. It will then look at other further functionality off the back of it. So you will then see in that recap, you've got the recording content, manual notes, transcripts. This feature doesn't actually require the Teams Premium license. So this is what's coming into the standard. Okay, so coming into the standard, it's not going to give you it's not going to give you the action items though off a lot of the back of it. Okay. It does. Recap does connect back. It does. Yes, Brendan. Okay. And things like action items and that will flow through into the likes of Planner and all sorts of things. Collaborative meeting notes. Now, we got to see this sort of a year ago as part of the MVP summit in 2022. So seeing these collaborative meeting notes finally coming through. We've been saying don't use meeting notes in Teams for a little while because it was going into Wiki. But now what's actually happening is it's plugging into that whole fluid functionality. So the fluid functionality then, and as it starts to flow through and using OneNote and all those integrated functionality, we're now seeing things that have been discussed and the agenda items, and we can start to put all of this in ourselves now, and it all then ties together in terms of that end-to-end solution right through into Teams, Loop, Planner, To Do, all the above over here. So you'll see how you can then start to do your own meeting notes and how it all plugs right across in terms of the collaborative notes. Now, what does that kind of look like afterwards? So after the fact, you can come back in and you'll then start to see, here's your loop components. Okay, so you can see those collaborative components flowing through, and it'll be on the Teams calendar meeting details pane to be able to help and support you as a loop component. So loving it. There are some live captions usability improvements coming into play. So the following options are supported. So you can change the spoken language, you can change the caption language, okay? And what I particularly like is you can actually adjust the colors, height, and position and font size. Now that really is now flowing into some fabulous accessibility features and functionality. When you look at things like, colorblind, or you have visual issues with really fine, small font. And I mean, that's not just, that's even for me with wearing glasses. I'm not saying you need to have, extreme difficulties when it comes to sight. I'm saying everyday improvements, and I do particularly like this. So we're starting to see that roll out in June. Now, the profanity filtering, this got sort of turned on by default, and there were some changes that came into play because there was a bit of pushback. Now, the reason for that is organisations, some were going, but we like being able to swear. But it came into play when we were in the MVP summit, where one of our Australian colleagues explained to the US colleagues what fig jam actually meant. And luckily, the profanity filtering filtered that one out in terms of the transcript and things like that. Yes, and he got a little bit of a on that one, and it was like, but you can turn it on and off. So it is controlled by the user. So you can come in and you can go whether you want to have that filtering of profane words in our meeting captions turned on or off. Okay, so especially if that transcript has to go live somewhere else, online or SharePoint, for example, and a much wider team needs it. There was a ton of changes that are coming down the line when it comes to mobile. Lots and lots of changes, especially when it's around Outlook, and we will get to that. Now, there has been a update in terms of some of the chat details and the experience when it comes to chat, whether it's group chats, one-on-one, or the self-chat with, with me, my own self-chat. So there's a whole update around the UI and the layout, and you're able to now access your own people card, chat details and files and all sorts of things from your own personal profile card. So those chat experiences have changed, and your own profile card has changed a little as well. So it used to be fairly simple in what you saw. There's an all new look around the My Day in terms of the views around tasks and the planner to do inside Microsoft Teams. So it gives you now the consolidation of tasks. There's task prioritization, completion, and progress tracking. That's all flown now into My Day. Okay. Also note, it actually came in and the notification came up in Teams, but it's not actually gone through on any of the online content or on the roadmap or lots of other stuff, but flagged emails. So flagged emails has now come into play. So you're not seeing it on here, but I took a screenshot and you can see flagged emails is actually inside Teams. So I'm really pleased that's come into line with the likes of To-Do on the desktop. It was available online, but it wasn't available in the To-Do component inside Teams. So now that's actually flowing in. It's one of my firm favorites. Like, yay. Good to see. So what's coming into SharePoint, that we've talked about this one in the past, the requesting external files into a SharePoint document library. There is a blog that's actually gone up by Efran. Now, he is the PM for OneDrive, so I would recommend going in, have a read of it. It's got some step-by-steps in there that I particularly like, and there's a video. It's around about 6 minutes. A good one to maybe put up for your champs if you've got a champs channel in terms of education, or even for the rest of your business. Okay. So in terms of what's coming to lists, now inside lists, it was really difficult when it came to filtering. Now you can actually remove them without having to go back into the column filter pane. So there's a new visual so that you can see these filters, and they'll then come across the top. So you can just click and turn them on and off as you wish to. So I like that. Little things. Wasn't anything coming into OneDrive. Drop that page out. So what's coming to forms? Now this one's going to be a little controversial. They allow those respondents to edit their responses. When you think about it, when you go submit and you push it through, there was no way for you to ever be able to go back and do an edit on it. Now this one might need to be turned off or on as a default. If you don't come in, you can see you can go in and tick it. That will be good in a lot of organizations who say we don't have the save button, so that you could come back to it if you wanted to. Now the downside is once you've submitted it, then effectively the person on the other end would look at it and maybe they haven't come back around after you've edited it. But it gives you a way to kind of do a save and come back if you wanted to. So it's it's handy. Now, this feature is an option that the form owner can turn on and off. Now, admins can also turn it off from the technical tenant administration. So the administrators can actually enable it or turn it off. So that one might want to be turned off across, say, the education space if you really don't want students to be able to potentially go back and even accidentally fix things after it's been submitted. Okay. So it comes down. Now, the answers, however, cannot be accessed, though, if it's a quiz and it's actually been closed or removed. So once it's been closed, you can't come back in. Okay. There has been the Insights app has had a bit of a redesign. So if you go in and have a look, originally when I looked at the roadmap, it was saying sort of end of April. So I've put it in that it's actually new rather than coming. Now, the tabs that are running down the left-hand side, there has been some changes. So you will see, for example, protected time and stay connected, for example, has been removed. Now, it is all still in there effectively underneath these tabs. You still can go online and you can still work with it online as well, but you will actually see that the tabs and that navigation has changed. So it's kind of collating together some of the content in a little bit of a different way in terms of the redesign. There is a blog and information in regards to the redesign if you want to go and have a look at it. But if you've got content that you've actually created to help people to understand how to turn on and do things like their focus time, and also you will need to update it. It's had a complete redesign. Okay. The Viva Connections customer-facing analytics has actually had a bit of an update so that you can understand how and when your users are actually engaged with the components across Viva Connections. So it'll have different things like your popular content types, the platform that they actually use to access the app, whether it was Slack or whether it was Teams or whether it was, because there's lots of different ways that you can come in and be able to track some of those analytics. Now, it's not down to an individual user in terms of the information. It is data that's actually aggregated. This is all in Viva Connections as part of those analytics. Okay. There's also some auto categorization coming into the meeting insights. So it will actually start to reflect a little bit more when we get in there, and those category insights around meetings will be based on things like the size of the meetings, how regular they are, the number of people, how big they are, so that we can get in and understand a little bit more around how big are these meetings. So when you see productivity in here, it's going to start flowing through around some of those meeting habits and categories. So this is a bit of a new look and feel. Now, this is the Viva Insights licensing. So it is the part of the more premium costing around Viva, but this auto categorization is coming into play underneath productivity. Okay. Now, I have touched on this previously where it got announced back in September as part of the Microsoft conference. So it did get talked about. It is now here. So it has come out. So when you're in Viva, you can actually display someone's name. So when you do their contact card, it's now going to flow in with the Viva suite, all of the different content, finding the people. It's got all of the different tags. It's got so much content flowing through, and it will come through into Outlook Web Access as well as the SharePoint web part. So it will all flow in and integrate for those profile cards for each individual person. So we're starting to see it become a little richer when it comes to those profile cards now. Viva Goals now has a usage report in the admin center. If you have reporter rights, whatever those reporter rights actually look like, there's lots of different reporter rights. So that's now flowing through in some of the metrics around Viva Goals, which we could have touched on a little bit earlier in the piece. The Microsoft Whiteboard app. A little earlier in the month, Whiteboard went into a bit of a glitch where you couldn't kind of add it in as a tab all of a sudden, and then it came back again. That's because it's now got one single tab that's updated and flowing through all of your whiteboards now. So you've got it flowing here, so you can see that you can add it as a whiteboard. It's not just that individual whiteboard for the meeting anymore. You can now have it flowing through. It kind of dropped out and then came back in again. And you can come in now and pre-prep boards and get them ready. Okay, so you can prep the board for a meeting and it will be the same and reflecting the app on your desktop a lot more inside Teams as a app plugin. Okay. Now, Viva Search. Sorry, video search. When it comes to Bing, and we had where, we've got office.com, SharePoint Stream, all those things were plugging into Bing as part of the login and of your user account in the top right-hand corner. So now when you come in and you do a search, video is now starting to plug in a little bit more as part of that search. So we're starting to see that flow through, which is really great because Stream as a content, for example, all those videos and everything that we had previously, when it flowed into OneDrive, it was very difficult to find your, OneDrive meeting content. And then it started going into SharePoint and it was hard to kind of aggregate all that information. So we're starting to see it all flow through as part of the Bing componentry too. Okay. When it comes to Office, all those different features of Office. Now, there was the new video that has come into play in terms of Copilot and actually what does it look like with Copilot plugging into OneNote. When we announced last month, OneNote wasn't in there as part of all of the videos, but you can start to see Copilot coming into play. There's a great video that you can go in and actually watch. I've embedded in. It is on the Copilot site in terms of Microsoft. Love what Copilot is doing. And some of the stuff that we saw in terms of the MVP summit was very cool with the direction that they're going with Copilot. It's in preview at the moment. To say some of the components blew our mind is probably a bit of an understatement. Really loving what's coming. Reducing down the mundane is impressive. Okay. So I won't play it here and now. It doesn't go for very long, but you can watch that one if you like. Now, Outlook for Mac is now free to actually use. Consumers can download Outlook for free on any Mac OS without needing to have a license or subscription. So you can get the native Outlook app now if you wish to. Okay. There is a change coming to lots of the navigation when it comes to Outlook for iOS as well as for Android. There's some more coming up that you will see. So search will be renamed feed if you're wanting to look at it. So it's got new icons and contacts, and files are now going to be found under the more button. So you can see the more button down the bottom here. So that will have rolled out. Video messaging when it comes through into Outlook for your mobile. You've now got what's called video unfurl and playback, so that you can play. It will jump straight into a full screen, so you can play things like maybe it was the recording or something for a meeting, or you can load meeting now video capture and upload it directly into your new email. Now that's Android at this point. Of course, it will also bring in, if you've got like if you're in government, for example, and you've got a DTA blueprint and you're not allowing, videos or uploads, it's going to inherently take on that security around it as well and not allow it. So that will all flow in, by the way. Okay. Bookings with me is now going public. So if you want to, you can actually do a tab. There is a link so you can see through Outlook. You can go a book with me. So this is a, one-on-one type scenario where you can send out a booking. Now that is accessible only at the moment through the Outlook web calendar, so it's online only. It is available right across the Office different suites, so that's based on even business as well as the 365, so it's across both subscriptions. Whether it's under you've got your frontline worker one, your enterprise, your academic, and so it's across all of it. You'll be able to have access to that booking with me, so you can schedule some of those one-on-ones with external candidates, so you can put up a public piece. I'm conscious, yes, I will be running over just a little bit, so for those that need to drop off, understandable. If not, the recording will also be there. It'll be up within a couple of weeks. Okay, so there's a Microsoft Authenticator Lite flowing through into Outlook. I like this because a lot of individuals don't like to download Authenticator onto their mobile phone. So what's actually happening is, as part of Outlook, there's going to be a Lite Authenticator kind of built into it to be able to bring in some of that security inside Outlook, so they don't have to download it. So that's coming in. Okay. Loop components now dropping into Outlook for mobile. You can now see that live preview, and it's going to be in there and supported right across. So you can see the Loop app. Now, I'm playing with the Loop app on my phone through test flight at the moment. It is a little glitchy. There's lots that's actually coming, but the Loop component is in Outlook. So that's the Outlook component. The Loop app itself, playing around, that will come out a little bit later. So it will all start to flow through. Message reminders. When it comes to Outlook, the reminders are now going to appear at the top. If you haven't actually replied to someone, it says, do you want to actually reply? So what it's going to do is it's going to detect if you haven't replied to someone and give you a little bit of a hand around that. Okay. So if it's not yet replied to, after 3 days, you're going to start getting that component flowing in. Now, the reminder will disappear after you reply to it, or if you swipe and actually dismiss it. You're able to disable that feature if you wish to in the app, but you can tap on and see that. You can also, tap on the reminder so you can see a notice in the reading pane why it's actually surfaced up as well. So you'll see here, if you open the email up, it will tell you up the top, just a reminder that you haven't replied when you go back in and you go to read it. Okay. Staying organized. If you haven't actually used Outlook boards before, now they've been around for a while, you can go online to your Outlook web, and on Outlook web are actually boards. So there's a blog that's gone live online by Keneal, and it's just going through boards. So if you want to help people understand how to create kind of a board collection where it all comes together, it's a good blog for you to have a look at. The what's new to Excel, my favorite thing is the chart task pane. Because over on the right-hand side, Outlook for the web, you get this whole chart pane over here to make it really quick and easy for you to be able to go in and just pick and choose as part of that chart pane now. So it's all interactive. I do like that one. Yeah. The next one is the quick access toolbar coming into play. It's kind of coming back again, I suppose, when it comes to Excel for Windows. So you can do your drop down and you'll be able to start to customize and play around and bring that all back. Okay. Another one is there's some new sets of Excel templates that have come in. Now, I've pulled this in. It was in there in terms of what new Excel as part of the blog. There are two that have come in. One of them is a retirement and the Finance Independence Retire Early Excel spreadsheet where you can just go in and plug your data in and it helps you to plan out your retirement. Okay. And there's another one called Essential Tips for Conditional Formatting. If you're doing any training, for example, the essential tips for conditional formatting, if you teach on Excel, for example, it's a really good one that's going to help them play around. I do like them. There's some fun ones there. There's some retiring going on. The shared with and the shared with details column, like the column in OneDrive and SharePoint, is no longer going to be updated. It wasn't actually reflecting correctly anyway, so that is now going to go. Okay, so if you were using that one and in terms of SharePoint and OneDrive, that's not going to be there anymore. There's also the workflow retirement. If you use workflows that were still flowing through from SharePoint 2013, they are going to be deprecated. It's going to be a couple of years. It's going to be a good 3 years till it is deprecated. However, you can kick in and start using Power Automate to be able to support your solution. So if you've still got those workflows coming through, you won't be able to use them in a couple of years. We've got a bit of time. Okay. So I know we've gone over just a little bit, but not too much. Just so that you know, at the Digital Workplace Conference coming up in Melbourne in August, I will actually be presenting. I have 2 speaker slots. The first one is going to be presenting with Megan Strand. If you know Megan, she has presented for us recently. She is a change specialist MVP, and we are focused on learning. What does learning looks like within a business, from theory through to practical? How do we, there's so many different components. We saw learning right at the beginning of all these different learning components, and how do you get people on that journey and how do we explore it? Off the back of that, because I will be talking about the Change Champions program that I have been doing recently over the last year and some of the successes, and it's a real life case scenario off the back of that one. I'll touch on it in the first one, and then I'll do a deep dive as a use case, and it will be a little longer than the one if you've watched it from any of the other, like Adelaide session, for example. It'll be longer, and it goes into then not just starting from help desk, it'll be flowing through to change champions, to help the help desk, right through to the whole organization, and what does the analytics, and I will be providing all sorts of templates and information off the back of that one. So that's going to be at the Digital Workplace Conference. If you didn't see or get involved in the Microsoft Viva Summit, you can catch up on the recordings. So they were specific sessions that were run that were of real interest. So if you're across the Viva space or want to get to know, go back and watch the recordings if you go and register. There's lots of upcoming events right across the globe. These aren't the community events, these are the conferences. So you can go and register if you happen to be there, and or some of them have virtual as well. So where do you find? So it's all the standard content, same old. I'll just skip through it. There's plenty in there for you to go back to. Last month's session is in here, which is that Viva Learning with Andrea Lund. So I've dropped that in. But what's up next? So this is probably way more interesting. I am actually going to have Daryl coming back. He was in, I think it was April last year. He's coming back. Loop has got a ton of new stuff going on. We talked about it last month. There was pages of information with a ton of links. Rather than us trying to work out what it is, when to use what, because there's been a lot of questions to me around Loop, especially now that it's going into SharePoint and all that interconnectivity and into Teams and meetings and And it's like, but hang on, workspaces in Loop seems like it's competing with Teams when you're doing a project. Which should I use? We're going to get Daryl in to just untangle that. He's the king of all things Loop and runs the Loop user group, global Loop user group, which is on LinkedIn that you can actually register for. So we'll have Daryl coming and untangling a lot of that for us next month, which I'm really looking forward to. So there we go. We've run over a little bit, but all good. We had some great questions with Cory a little earlier. Does anyone have any questions, anything they would like to ask, any feedback, anything they would like to know after our recap? If not, I'm more than happy to leave it there. As always, there's plenty of content. The presentation is available for you afterwards. Both mine and Cory's presentation is plugged into my presentation, so you can go and get that as well. Lots of fabulous new features, and I look forward to seeing you again next month. I will turn off the recording unless anyone wants to, in case anyone wants to have a chat with me, and appreciate it. Yes, Aaron. No, just wanted to do a clap. No question. Why, thank you for the clap, everyone. Until next month, I'll turn off the recording now. Thank you for joining.